How's it going, AND Camp? This is Justin Giboney, president of the AND Campaign, and this is another civic update where we are trying to raise civic literacy among Christians so that as we go out and engage, we can do so in an informed and effective manner. There is a reason that I say that every episode. It's because I want to drive home the understanding that Christians have to engage in an informed manner. We have to know this process, we have to know the issues, and we have to understand the issues from a biblical worldview. We can't just be going out into the streets, into the civic space, and just following after some party, following after some ideological tribe. We need to know for ourselves as a body what we believe and why and how it applies to politics and culture. And this is the AND Campaign's effort to do our part to add to that civic literacy, to that civic education. And so that's why we do this every week. Today, I want to start off by asking you a question. And it's a question that I want you to consider seriously and honestly with yourself. Feel free to respond and, on social media or whatever, but I want you to answer for yourself most importantly. And the question is, do you hate your political opponents? If you're a Republican, do you hate Democrats? If you're a Democrat, do you hate Republicans? Think about that. Be honest about that. Because based on the numbers, some of the numbers that I'm going to present in a minute, some of you do hate your political opponents. And I think we should all know that that's not really defensible when it comes to the Bible. But based on the numbers, there are many Christians out there that do hate their political opponents. And so I want to get into that a little bit. Many of you have seen that the AND Campaign has been using the hashtag New Christian Politics. And the reason we're using New Christian Politics, and in fact, the first civic update this year was about New Christian Politics and what that meant. But just to get into it a little bit more, the reason that we're using that hashtag is because the AND Campaign believes that it's time for Christians to have a complete paradigm shift when it comes to how we engage politics. Meaning, we need to think about politics completely differently, and we need to engage politics completely differently if we want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. If we don't want people to look at, well, Christians actually make things worse than make it better. That's not always true. But if we want to make sure that it's not true and make sure that we're constructive actors in the public square, we need a new way of thinking about politics. One way to go about that, or one part of that, is making sure that our political party is not our identity. Now, I've said over and over again, you can be in a political party, that's fine. But your political party should not be your identity. Meaning, when you look at a policy issue or you look at a problem in society, do you view it as a Democrat? Do you view it as a Republican? Or do you first view it as a Christian? And not really caring where it may fall on the political spectrum, but first viewing it as a Christian, how should I deal with this issue from the view of the compassion and the conviction of the gospel? Not many of us do that. And so when we talk about new Christian politics, that's what we're talking about, because we can't just be following behind parties and ideological tribes and be faithful to the gospel. So we have to make sure that we're looking at these issues as Christians first. And that's really a big deal when we start talking about what I want to get into today, which is really hatred within partisanship and within our political landscape. Earlier this year, two political scientists, one from Louisiana State University and one from the University of Maryland, wrote an academic paper called Lethal Mass Partisanship. Lethal Mass Partisanship. And really they were talking about how lethal our partisanship and our party affiliation is becoming. They start off this conversation talking about the Federalist Paper number 10. So the Federalist Papers were the papers written by some of the founding fathers where they were trying to convince the states to ratify the Constitution. And so they wrote a whole bunch of papers. Number 10 was written by James Madison, who was the fourth president, and he talks about factions. Factions are either, parties or coalitions that come together based on a shared interest or a shared passion. But he was saying these can get really dangerous and are a very serious danger to democracy. And so they start off by talking with that, but then they get into some statistics and some data about how we are beginning to hate our political opponents. And on Civic Updates, we like to talk data. When we can get our hands on data, we're going to talk about the data. I'd also like to mention that Thomas Edsall, who's a writer for the New York Times, had a very good write-up on this particular study. But listen to some of these numbers. Number one, it says 42% of people in both parties believe that people in the other party are downright evil. That they are downright evil. If I'm a Democrat, we're good, but the Republicans, if you're a Republican, you're evil because you're in that party. Now, if we want to get super biblical and theological, we understand that to some extent we're all broken, that none of us are good. So we get that. But what this is implying is that one side is good and everybody on the other side is bad. I don't think you can justify that through the Bible. And I think if you really know what goes on in both parties, you wouldn't say something like that. And so I do understand that we have very serious differences and issues that we don't just want to look over. But saying that the other party is more evil than one in this situation, I think is a big mistake, right? Now, they may have policy that's worse. They may see things in a way that doesn't make sense. That's true. And it may be serious issues, but that's probably going too far. Listen to this other statistic. 1 out of 5 Republicans and Democrats believe that their political adversaries lack the traits to be considered fully human. Lack the traits to be considered fully human. 1 out of 5. 20%. That's crazy. Let me give you another one. 20% of Democrats, 16% of Republicans believe that the country would be better off if a large portion of people in the other party just died. So they need to die in order for this country to get better. That's what some of us are saying. Here's the last one. 18% of Democrats, 14% of Republicans said violence would be justified if the other party won in 2020. Those are pretty big numbers. 18 and 14% saying that violence would be okay if the other party won in 2020. And based on these numbers, especially the 42% of people saying that the other side is downright evil, means that there are Christians that are participating in this conversation that agree with this stuff, right? Just by the numbers, 42%, there are Christians within that. Make sure you're not one of those people, right? One of the other things that we got from this article in the New York Times was that and this is crazy, it said that the most knowledgeable and sophisticated voters were the most likely to follow their party, not based on principle, but based on their identity. So when an issue came up, they would check with the party and they would go along with the party because it was part of their identity, not even based on the principle, right? And these are the most knowledgeable and sophisticated, quote unquote, voters, right? And so it's not even a matter of how much education you have or whatever. Some of the most educated and knowledgeable folks are just as partisan and gullible as everybody else. The bottom line is, as a Christian, how do you separate yourself from that? Are you strong enough to say, yeah, I'm part of a party because I believe this party has better values and I believe this party has better policy? But are you able to separate yourself and still view policy and these conversations as a Christian first? A lot of people aren't doing that, haven't been able to do that. And the AND campaign is serious about helping Christians get to a point where they are able to make that separation. To say, yeah, I'm in a party, but this party does not control me. It does not own me. I make my own decisions. And if I have to go against the party, I'm willing to do that. And the reason why that's necessary is because to be faithful, you have to think for yourself. But when we look at statistics that say these people are not fully human, when we look at statistics, that say these people, the U.S. would be better if these people were dead, we need to start thinking about where we're going. We need to start thinking about Matthew 5:44, love your enemy. We need to start thinking about, 1 Peter 3:9. Don't repay evil for evil and insult for insult. Are we taking those lessons and are we taking those things that we know that we have to abide by and applying them in politics, or do we just apply them in church? It is, and believe me, it is very hard on some issues. So for some people, the issue is immigration. For some people, the issue is abortion. For some people, the issue is voters' rights, discrimination, things of that nature. It's very hard for somebody to be against you on an issue that you're that passionate about and not hate them. But the Bible calls you not to hate them, right? That doesn't mean you can't be passionate about it and do everything you can do to change it, but you cannot hate them. We have to understand that we have to do better as we go into these politics. If Frederick Douglass can do it when he was a slave and he was going against people that were trying to maintain slavery, then you can do it too. Let's do better.